What runs faster than a man with a guilty secret? Can you outrun a shadow that lives inside your own chest? Some men build castles out of lies, believing the walls are high enough to keep the truth out. They think that if they change their name, change their city, and change their suits, the past will forget them. But the past has a long memory, and silence is often louder than a scream. What happens when the one set of eyes you are terrified to meet suddenly appears in the crowd? In a bustling city where the noise never stops, a wealthy man sat in a tower of glass, believing he was untouchable. There were no police sirens wailing below. There were no angry mobs at the gate. Just the quiet hum of an air conditioner, and a sudden, cold knowing that his time had run out. He had money. He had power. He had fooled everyone from the market women to the bank managers. So why was his hand shaking as he held a simple glass of water? This isn't just a story about a scammer or a thief. It is a story about the heavy price of a cheap conscience, and the moment when we finally have to pay what we owe. Before he became the man everyone whispered about, there was just Caleb. A boy with a sharp mind, a hungry heart, and a dangerous talent for making people believe him. Welcome to Stories by the King, where every story carries a heartbeat, and every truth demands to be heard. Now, before we begin, where in the world are you watching from? Is it morning in Lagos, evening in Nairobi, or midnight in London? Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Now, lean in. Because the knock on the door isn't coming from the police. It's coming from the one person who knows who Caleb really is. Caleb stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his office, looking down at the city like a god inspecting his creation. From the 20th floor, the people below looked like ants, scurrying through the traffic and the heat, fighting for scraps while he drank imported water chilled to perfection. He adjusted his silk tie, catching his reflection in the glass. The man staring back was impeccable. His suit cost more than what his father had earned in a lifetime. His shoes were Italian leather, polished so bright they mirrored the fluorescent lights of the boardroom. To the world, Caleb was a visionary, a real estate developer who turned dust into gold. But inside the quiet chambers of his mind, he knew the truth. He was a fisherman, and the city was his river, filled with fish begging to be caught on his hooks of false promises and paper dreams. His company, Golden Horizon Estates, was the masterpiece of his deception. He sold land that did not exist, or plots that were deep within uninhabitable swamps, to pensioners looking for a place to retire and young couples dreaming of their first home. He had a voice like velvet and a smile that made you feel like the most important person in the room. He took their life savings with a handshake and a blessing, then disappeared behind layers of bureaucracy and shell companies. He felt no guilt, or at least, that is what he told himself. He believed that if people were foolish enough to trust a stranger with their gold, they deserved to lose it. In Caleb's world, there were only wolves and sheep, and he had decided long ago that he would never be the sheep again. He checked his gold watch. He had a meeting in 10 minutes to close a deal that would make him richer than he had ever imagined. But as he turned away from the window, a strange sensation crawled up his spine, cold and sharp. It was the feeling of being watched, not by a security camera, but by a spirit. He froze, his heart hammering against his ribs in a rhythm of panic. He scanned the luxurious office, the mahogany desk, the abstract art, the leather chairs, but it was empty. Yet the air felt heavy, charged with a specific scent he hadn't smelled in 15 years. It was the smell of wood smoke and old paper, the scent of the village library where he used to hide as a boy. His breath hitched. It couldn't be. He had buried that life. He had buried that boy. He shook his head violently, trying to dislodge the memory, but the fear lingered like a stain. It wasn't the police he feared. He had the police chief on his payroll. It wasn't the judges, he dined with them on Sundays. The only person Caleb feared was a man named Teacher Silas. Silas was not a rich man, he owned nothing but books and a bicycle that squeaked when he pedaled. But Silas had eyes that seemed to see right through your skin and look directly at your soul. Years ago, Silas had taken Caleb in when he was an orphan, fed him, and taught him. And how did Caleb repay him? By stealing the church building fund that Silas had been guarding for 20 years, money meant for a clinic, and running to the city to start his empire. Caleb had never looked back. He told himself Silas was dead by now, consumed by poverty and old age. But that smell, the wood smoke, was a ghost in his nose. He walked to his desk and poured a drink, his hand trembling slightly. "You are tired, Caleb," he whispered to the empty room. "Just tired." His secretary buzzed in, her voice tinny through the intercom. "Sir, there is an old man in the lobby. He doesn't have an appointment, and he refuses to leave." Caleb laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Security, Martha. Throw him out. I don't have time for beggars." There was a pause, a long silence that stretched the tension in the room until it was thin as a wire. "Sir," Martha's voice came back, uncertain and trembling, "he says he isn't here for money. He says he is here for his son. He says his name is Silas." The glass slipped from Caleb's fingers. It hit the thick carpet with a dull thud, spilling amber liquid like blood across the floor. The world tilted on its axis. The past had not just caught up, it had walked through the front door. Caleb did not go down to the lobby immediately. He couldn't. He paced his office like a trapped animal, loosening his tie as sweat pricked his forehead. The air conditioning was humming at full blast, yet the room felt stiflingly hot. Logic tried to fight his panic. He is just an old school teacher, Caleb thought. I am a giant of industry. I can crush him. I can buy the building he lives in and evict him. I can have him arrested for trespassing. But the logic rang hollow. Caleb knew that teacher Silas did not operate in the realm of money or force. Silas operated in the realm of truth, and against truth, Caleb had no weapon. He wiped his face with a handkerchief, composed his features into a mask of arrogance, and decided he would face him. He would intimidate the old man, give him a few notes of cash, and send him back to the dust he came from. When the elevator doors opened into the marble lobby, Caleb stopped. Security guards were standing awkwardly near the reception desk, looking unsure of what to do. In the center of the sleek, modern space stood Silas. He looked exactly the same, yet older, like a mountain that had been weathered by wind but remained unmovable. He wore a faded gray suit that was threadbare at the elbows and held a battered hat in his hands. He looked small against the grandeur of the corporate lobby, yet he commanded the space. When Caleb stepped out, the staff went silent. They expected their boss to yell. Instead, Caleb walked slowly, his expensive shoes clicking on the floor, stopping 5 feet away. He wanted to shout, "Get out," but the words died in his throat. "Hello, Caleb," Silas said softly. His voice was not angry. It was not loud. It was filled with a terrifying gentleness. It was the same voice that had taught Caleb to read, the same voice that had comforted him when he scraped his knees. Caleb stiffened, crossing his arms to build a barrier between them. "I go by Mr. Okeke now," Caleb said coldly, his voice echoing off the walls. "I am a busy man. If you want a donation for the village, speak to my assistant. If you are here to embarrass me, I will have you thrown out." The security guards took a half step forward, hands on their batons. Caleb felt a surge of power. Yes, he was in control here. This was his kingdom. Silas didn't look at the guards. He didn't look at the marble walls or the crystal chandelier. He looked only at Caleb's eyes. "I did not come for money, my son. I came because I heard you were building a new mall in the marshlands of Oja. I heard you took money from the widows in our village, telling them it was an investment." Caleb's heart skipped a beat. How did he know? "That is business," Caleb snapped, his voice rising. "They signed contracts. It is legal. Silas slowly shook his head, a look of profound sadness washing over his face. Stealing is stealing, even if you do it with a pen instead of a gun, Caleb. I came to return something you left behind. Silas reached into his worn pocket. Caleb flinched, instinctively stepping back, fearing a weapon. But Silas pulled out a small, tattered notebook. It was cheap, dog-eared, and covered in dirt. Caleb recognized it instantly. It was his diary from when he was 12 years old. The diary where he had written his dreams, not of money, but of becoming a doctor, of healing people, of being a man of honor like Silas. Silas held it out. You forgot who you were, the old man whispered. The boy who wrote in this book would be ashamed of the man standing in front of me. I am not here to fight you, Caleb. I am here to tell you that the police are not coming. I am the only one who knows where the church money went. I never told them. I paid it back myself, working for 15 years to cover your sin. Caleb felt the floor drop out from under him. The shock was physical, a punch to the gut that left him gasping. The revelation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Caleb stared at the old man, his mind reeling. For 15 years, he had looked over his shoulder, terrified that Silas had reported him. He had assumed Silas despised him, haunted him, wanted him to rot in a cell. Instead, the man he feared most had been walking in the scorching sun, day after day, year after year, to pay back the debt Caleb had stolen. Silas had protected him. Silas had taken the shame upon himself so that Caleb could have a second chance that Caleb had used to cheat even more people. The cruelty of his own actions crashed down on him. He looked at his Italian shoes, and suddenly, they felt like weights dragging him to the bottom of the ocean. Why? Caleb croaked, his voice cracking, the velvet facade gone. Why didn't you turn me in? I stole everything from you. The staff in the lobby were watching openly now, their mouths slightly agape, seeing their invincible CEO crumbling before a peasant. Silas took a step closer and placed the notebook in Caleb's trembling hand. Because love does not count the cost, Caleb. I raised you. When you steal, you do not just take money, you take a piece of your own soul. I feared that if you went to prison, you would be lost forever. I hoped that one day, you would remember the good in you. But I see now, perhaps I waited too long. Silas turned to leave, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Wait. The word ripped out of Caleb's throat, desperate and raw. He didn't know why he said it. He should let the old man go. He should go back upstairs, sign the deal, and make another million. But the image of Silas working for 15 years to cover his sin was burning him alive. Caleb ran past the security guards, grabbing Silas's arm. The expensive fabric of Caleb's suit brushed against the rough cotton of Silas's coat. You paid it back? Caleb asked, tears welling up in his eyes, blurring the sharp lines of his empire. Every penny, Silas said quietly. It took my farm. It took my retirement. But my conscience is clean. Can you say the same, Caleb? When you sleep on your silk sheets, do you rest? Caleb looked around the lobby. He saw the admiration in his employees' eyes turn to confusion and pity. He looked at the notebook in his hand. He opened it to the first page. When I grow up, I want to be like Teacher Silas, because he is a good man. The handwriting was childish and clumsy. Caleb fell to his knees. Right there on the polished marble floor, in front of his staff, in front of the world, the great tycoon collapsed. He wept. He wept for the boy he killed. He wept for the widows he cheated. He wept for the man who loved him enough to suffer for him. It wasn't a dignified cry, it was the ugly, heaving sob of a man breaking open. He looked up at Silas, tears streaming down his face. I will fix it, Caleb whispered. I will give it all back. And he meant it. That afternoon, the deal for the new mall was cancelled. The lawyers were confused, The partners were furious, but Caleb didn't care. He began the long, painful process of liquidation. He sold the cars. He sold the high-rise office. He tracked down the women from the village and the pensioners he had swindled. It took everything he had. Within 6 months, Caleb was no longer a millionaire. He lived in a small rental apartment. He drove a used car. But as he sat on his modest balcony, drinking tea with Silas, watching the sunset, he realized something profound. He had no money in the bank, but for the first time in 15 years, he was not afraid of the knock on the door. He was free. Caleb never regained his place on the cover of business magazines. He never wore Italian suits again. Instead, he became a teacher in the very village he once fled, teaching mathematics and honesty to boys who reminded him of himself. He didn't have gold, but he had respect, and he had his name back. This isn't just a story about money lost or gained. It is a story about the truth that no matter how far you run, you always take yourself with you. Peace is not something you buy, it is something you build by doing what is right. And a heart that chooses redemption over riches, and truth over terror, will never have to fear the sound of footsteps behind it. If this story moved you, hit like, share it with a friend, and tell me in the comments, what is worth more to you, a wallet full of cash with a heavy heart, or an empty pocket with a peaceful mind? Subscribe to Stories by the King, where every story carries a heartbeat, and every choice carries a lesson. This is Stories by the King, where love wins, and purpose finds its home.